London Real, one of the coolest up-and-coming podcasts.
It is a glorious summer in London. I don't think I can remember so many continuous days without rain, and I'm just hoping it never ends. It's a magical city when the sun is out like this, and one that I would say is the best city in the world when it's sunny. When it's not, it's top 5. This week on the show we have the first British female fighter ever in the UFC, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championships, and that's Ms. Rosi Sexton. She came by the studio to talk about her recent appearance in the UFC, her very close decision win, and all the pressure that built up to it. It's a fascinating story, and from time to time I have cage fighters on the show, and I'm sure you're tempted to kind of tune out. I don't watch that. I don't like fighting, but Rosi's is a truly unique story. She was the first fighter ever to get BBC coverage in this country, and that includes the guys making the $1 million payouts, the Anderson Silvas, the John Jones that have Nike sponsors and Burger King sponsors. But it was Rosi that got BBC coverage because it's an interesting story. Rosi has a master's degree from Cambridge, which is the equivalent of MIT or Harvard. She's got a PhD in theoretical computer science, and she likes punching people in the face and tapping them out. And it's an interesting story, and that's why the BBC covered it. And we were so lucky on London Real that I'm good friends with Pete Irving, and Pete was in her corner in Canada for this fight a few weeks ago, and they are very close. As Peter says during the show, if it wasn't for Rosi, he would have no interest in women's MMA, let alone watching or coaching someone in women's MMA. So, Rosi transcends that. Obviously, Pete saw something in her early on in their training, and you could see it in the fight. Probably not familiar with these terms, but during the fight, Rosi's opponent, Alexis Davis, was trying to choke her out, basically to cut off the supply of blood to her brain so she would pass out in something called a triangle choke. And a lot of people would have tapped out, which means says, I want to go home, I don't like this anymore, this sucks. And Rosi powered through about 2 minutes of a triangle choke and basically continued to punch Alexis in the face and easily won that first round. So it was a great story. Rosi fought at a higher weight than she's normal, and she really performed. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Rosi's the real deal. We talked about sexiness in women's MMA and why women fighters have to look glamorous and punch each other in the face, and why that is. Why do we like them to wear heels and then get physically brutal? And we talk about why Rosi refuses to play the game that much, and she plays it to a certain extent, but otherwise she's herself. So I really think you'll enjoy Rosi, and it was great to see her and Pete kind of vibe off each other because they trust each other very much, and I don't think we could have got this exclusive interview with Rosi, and I don't think she would have opened up without Pete being there. So thank you to them both. As you know, I am officially bulletproof. What does that mean, Brian? That's a good question. It means that I start my day off with bulletproof coffee. And what that is, it's a coffee where the mycotoxins have been minimized. And these are basically mold that grows on the majority of coffee. And what Dave Asprey's done is he's done his best to minimize that. And then he's made his coffee in kind of a Tibetan way, where he puts a chunk of unsalted grass-fed butter and upgraded MCT oil into the cup in the morning. And you drink it, and you can see why these Sherpas can go up Mount Everest on this warm, buttery brew that they drink every day, because it basically means you don't eat until like 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And if you're trying to lose 10, 15 pounds, and you also want a way to get a cleaner coffee in you, I highly recommend this. All my homies are doing this. All my boys that are very smart. I got Pete Irving doing this, Paul G, who's co-host of the show, and they're like, dude, I do it religiously and I love it. So please try it out, whether it's a weight loss tool or something you want to do to just get your brain working better. I do it every morning. You can click on the clickable link here, or there'll be one below on the YouTube, and you can go to either Xbrain, or you can go to the US and pick yourself up a bag. I would say try it for 2 weeks, every morning. Now I can't drink coffee without butter. It's ridiculous. So thank you to the Bulletproof guys. They've also got a great blog with like 250,000 words of free content. You can check that out too. And we're going to be talking about some cocoa powder and vanilla powder they've got coming up. So there you go. As I mentioned, if you want to buy this stuff in Europe or the UK, then we've got your problem solved. Xbrain. The guys at Xbrain have all of the Bulletproof products and all of the Onnit products, and they ship them here without any foreign exchange, without any customs. You basically get the stuff within 2 to 3 days. And again, all my boys here are doing that, and they're using X-Brain because it just makes sense. You can go there, you can get the bulletproof coffee, you can get all of the Onnit products. I like having an Alpha Brain now in the morning right when I pop the coffee. Even Dave Asprey recommended that. So I pop an Alpha Brain, maybe 2. Of course, if I see Max Kaiser, I need 3 in the morning, and then there's my morning. I can pretty much do what I want to do. So check out the guys at X-Brain. Go to xbrain.co.uk. There's a clickable link under here as well. Check it out. Like I said, do the bulletproof for 2 weeks. I think it'll change your life. So thanks to those guys very much. And that's it. My pre-roll is coming to an end. We've got exciting stuff coming up. I met Mr. Rick Doblin last night, who founded a place called MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Research something. I think I'm forgetting the letter. And he's almost 60, and he's been there and done that. He was friends with Albert Hoffman, the creator of LSD. He hung out with Terence McKenna in the 80s and debated him as far as the appropriateness of using MDMA as therapy. They're doing MDMA therapy on post-traumatic stress disorder patients. They are pushing the envelope when it comes to legalizing some of these very important medicines. And they are medicines, and they are very important. And on top of that, he's just a cool dude. So I was so excited to meet him. He was in town for the Breaking Convention, and Alexander Ward was the co-host. So I definitely look forward to that. And Silicone Reel continues getting bigger and bigger. We just filmed our 3rd show with a wonderful woman named Courtney Boyd Myers, and she's an American over here in London, and she gave us a good vibe of what the tech scene is like. And man, everyone I'm meeting on this Silicone Reel would be great London Reel guests. They're cool people, a good story, a good perspective, lots of advice, and I'd be lying if I said I'm not having a great time doing this Silicone Reel. So please check in for that. It's got a very similar vibe to London Reel, and even if you're not into tech startup, they're very cool people. So I think you'll like that. And you know, we got some big people coming up. We might have Graham Hancock in the house. Shh. And you know, we got Dan Hardy in August. If you have any suggestions for guests, send them to me, or if you want to be part of the team, we got tons of interns now. Some of them are blogging for us. Some of us are helping promote on Twitter. Some of us are booking guests. It's just, there's a lot to do. So if you want to get involved in that, send me an email, info@londonreel.tv, and you know, volunteer your services. We need 10 hours a week, 2 on Sunday, and you'll be part of the team. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, you can send me any guest suggestions to that same email, or even better, give me an introduction to the guest and then email me, and that'll make me even happier. So that's it. Now I give you UFC fighter, first female ever in the UFC, Ms. Rosi Sexton, and her corner man, Mr. Peter Irving. Peace. Ready? Let's do this.
Ready.
This is London Reel. I am Brian Rose. My co-host today is Peter Irving. He is a professional fighter who prefers K1 rules, but I think recently he posted that after watching a certain female fight in the UFC, you might be headed back to MMA.
I've been giving it some thought recently, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to see that. Pete's also a writer for Fighters Only magazine, and he is a pretty frequent co-host on London Reel. How many shows have you done?
I think I was a guest on 1, and I've done 3.
3 since.
Yeah, I've co-hosted 3 times.
Yeah, it's all good. Most recently with John Ronson. I'm glad you were here because I hadn't read his books, and you read all of his books.
Yeah, it was great.
Because I think I would have been, I wouldn't have been cool if I had just done it because I didn't know enough about him. So thanks for being here, Pete. Our guest today is Ms. Rosi Sexton, who is a mixed martial arts fighter and the very first British female ever to fight in the UFC, also known as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. She has a master's degree from Cambridge and a PhD in theoretical computer science. And she's also a sports therapist, an osteopath, and a writer for the Huffington Post and Fighters Only magazine. What have we been doing with our spare time, Pete? I know, get on it. Rosie, welcome to London Reel.
Hi there.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
You know, I met you this morning when I was training with Pete. And I train with Pete a couple times a week, you know, at Urban Kings. And so Rosie comes in and I get to meet her. And then she watches me train with you. And Pete puts me through this kind of cardio circuit at the end of every training session. And I'm pushing the trawler and hitting the tire with the sledgehammer. And then Rosie's watching me. And I'm just thinking, Rosie's probably like, that's some weak-ass shit, Brian. So I just didn't think Rosie was very impressed with my workouts. She's like, yeah,
man, they're good. I think we need a videotape.
I was just like, Rosie's like, that's what I do before I brush my teeth.
But no, it was great meeting you today. You've had a crazy few months, I would say. Probably one you wouldn't have predicted a year ago, let alone 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, that you would have had this.
Yeah, I mean, or at the beginning of this year, to be honest. I really didn't see this coming at all.
And just for people that don't know, this is basically you got a call from the UFC, which is the biggest, martial arts organization in the world, by far. You were I think you were the first MMA fighter ever to get BBC coverage. Is that correct?
I'm not absolutely sure. Possibly.
Very possibly.
And I've done various bits of media over the years.
And for people that aren't familiar with mixed martial arts, the role of women's in MMA is just huge right now, and it's taking the sport like almost much further than the men could have taken it. With you and the press you're getting, and then the Ronda Rousey phenomenon and everything. It's amazing to watch, and I think everyone's going to owe a big debt of gratitude to the women in 5 years' time, because they're going to be like, wow, now the whole pay structure is gone and popularity is gone because of the women. And I don't think anyone predicted that, including Dana White. He said 2 years ago he would never have women in the UFC, I think. So anyways, I was just wondering if you could walk us through your last few months, from getting the call to doing your preparation to going to Winnipeg with Pete in your corner a few weeks ago. I watched it. I'll talk about that later. But what's it been like?
Yeah, it's all been pretty crazy. I mean, it all started, I think it was the Monday after the Ronda Rousey Liz Carmouche fight, and I just turned up to training. And my coach up in Liverpool, Paul Rimmer, he sort of sat me down and kind of said, "What do you think about the fight?" I don't know. It was all right. It was a fight.
You watched it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he sort of asked, "Well, what are you doing with yourself at the moment?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm training a bit, working. Where are we going with this?" And he sort of said, "Well, what do you think about fighting for the UFC?" I said, "Well, it's not really my weight class." And he goes, "Yeah, but if the UFC called you and said, 'Do you want to fight?' would you do it?" And I went, "Well, yeah, of course I would."
Did this smell fishy when he's asking these questions? Because Pete...
Yeah.
Okay. Pete says you're pretty wise.
I had an idea, there's something going on here. He goes, "Okay, well, leave it with me." And then, I spoke to him later and I said, "You've got me thinking now." And he goes, "Well, it's too late, because I've just spoken to Graham, who's my manager, and, it's, we'll see what happens," sort of thing. So, I mean, the next I heard back was like a few months later, when Graham calls me. His number comes up on my phone. I just had a feeling when that number came up, it's like, there's something going on here. And he calls me and I go, "Have you got 5 minutes?" "Okay, what's going on?" And he goes, "I've got you a UFC fight if you want it. So Alexis Davis, 15th of June. Call me back later when you've had a think about it."
How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big sort of adrenaline rush, and you go, "Whoa, okay, shit just got real."
Yeah, a little scary.
Yeah, a little scary. I don't know. I mean, I think it's something that I'd thought about for so long, ever since I started fighting. Wouldn't it be great if the UFC had a women's division? But I never really got any further than that. I always assumed it would happen at some point, but I never really thought it was going to happen in time for me.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be retired by the time that finally came round. And then even when it did happen, I hadn't really given it that much consideration. I thought, well, it's not my weight class. It's unlikely that I'm going to get that shot. So when it finally did come round, it was somewhere between a dream come true and completely terrifying.
Yeah, I bet maybe since you thought about it for so long, you'd probably
Yeah.
compartmentalize it into something that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And more than that,
exactly.
I mean, that was around about the time where you were starting to run out of options.
Yeah.
When it didn't look like there was a UFC.
Yeah. I mean, I'd pretty much decided that I wasn't really going to fight again unless something big came up. I'm not sure I'd even thought about what I meant by something big coming up.
So
I hadn't considered the UFC as an option, really.
So it's like a retirement frame of mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of sort of said, well, maybe I'm going to concentrate a bit more on grappling now. It had reached a stage where it wasn't really making sense for me, because every fight camp I did, I sort of put my life on hold for 2 months to do that fight camp and train for that. And it had just reached a stage where I couldn't commit to doing that for the way things were.
Okay. Did you have to think about it before you said yes? Or did you have to did you write like a pros and cons list? You seem like the kind of person that might write the pros and cons list. Or did you just go with a feeling?
No, I mean, there really was no... There was no way I was going to turn that down.
Okay.
There was no... it wasn't a real question.
Okay.
It was... You're going to fight in the UFC, aren't you?
Yeah. I was explaining it to my girlfriend. I was like, you get the call to fight in the UFC, and I told her that if I ever got that call, I would have to say yes. Yeah. And she was laughing, and I'm like, but I would have to, no matter what shape I was in or anything. Yeah. You don't get that phone call very often,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Anybody would.
It did. And how many months out was this when they called?
That was, I think, 10 weeks out.
Jesus.
It was the beginning of April. I remember thinking, if that had been 2 days earlier, I'd have been thinking, this is an April Fool.
And now you naturally fight normally at 125 pounds, or that would be your ideal weight?
That's the weight class I've been fighting at for the last few years anyway. That's
before
probably
wrestling
my
at
best
what?
weight.
You wrestled at 115?
Yeah, I toyed with the idea of making the cut to 115 at one point, and I did a test cut for a wrestling competition. It didn't work out that great for me. I mean, I think I could probably have tweaked the cut. I think I could have done it better. I probably could, if the incentive was there to do it. I mean, if the UFC said we've got a 115 weight class, then I'd probably sit down and look at it, and no doubt I could make that weight. But that's not the way things turned out.
Okay, and I mean from the get go, I mean Alexis Davis, your opponent, she was kind of like the story, and it was in Canada. She's Canadian, and it was this whole primed thing, and then all of a sudden Rosie's in the mix, and like you get this whole feeling. It's like, okay, are they putting her in there with Rosie? Are they building her career? Are they building your career? And I didn't know what was going on. And then you were like this wild card with this whole varied background you have, with the master's degree and the PhD, and then you started getting lots of press. And then Ariel Helwani interviews you, and he's like, you're the most talked about fighter on the card, which is saying a lot. It was a big card. So what happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when I got the call, after the initial excitement had worn off, and sat down and looked at it, okay, I'm fighting the Canadian fighter in Canada, and this is one of the girls they're grooming for a title shot.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm going up a weight class, and let's read between the lines here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people had the idea that I was being brought in to lose that fight. I think that was very much the impression that people had got.
The odds makers suggested as much.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
Even though, in fairness to the UFC, they don't, unlike boxing, they don't seem to set up these fights to build careers. Like almost every fight seems like everyone's almost fighting for their careers. From what I see in the past, it doesn't seem like they're like, let's give this person. Yeah. Every fight seems hard. So
I mean, I always saw it as a pretty reasonable matchup. I think the way things worked out, I think it was perhaps a bit more even than maybe some people assumed going into it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of as soon as things kicked off, really, we started getting a lot of interest from the media. I mean, one with it being the first UK female fighter, and also sort of my background and everything. I think that's something that's always appealed to journalists.
Yeah, definitely.
They're like the I suppose the incongruity of my educational background and the fact that I'm a fighter, and these two things don't seem to mesh very well in people's heads.
Yeah, for the casual fan that doesn't understand the sport, then it's a great headline because they're like, "What? This doesn't make sense," even though it makes a lot of sense if you delve a bit deeper.
Yeah. I don't. Are there any other sort of well-educated UFC fighters?
There's quite a lot of fighters who've got college degrees and reasonably well educated, and they've got people from professional backgrounds, and so I don't think I'm certainly not the only well-educated fighter there.
But when you drop Cambridge in there and PhDs, then that's a little bit above. I mean, they always used to say Chuck Liddell had a university degree in accounting. Like that would always throw that out there, but they're probably not extremely highly educated.
I think I maybe have a few, maybe a bit overqualified for the job, I'd say.
And did the UFC push this PR on you, or did it just kind of come naturally with people just finding you? Or are they a machine when it comes to that?
A bit of both, really, a bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, I think, obviously, the UFC have people who take care of that sort of stuff, and the PR guys who we'd like you to do this interview and that interview thing. But I mean, at the same time, I think there's quite a lot of people who got in touch with me directly and said, oh, would you be interested in doing an interview?
You always seem to have been like the go-to person for, a bit of MMA stereotype busting. Whenever somebody, takes a picture of some kids having a grappling match in a cage, and then it's a cage fighting kids headline. Then you turn up on TV a couple of days later, trying to go, oh no, we're not all savages. Are you on on a list somewhere for like go-to people for media types, or do they just?
Possibly, I think various people have my phone number, so.
It's a great story, So, you go to the UFC. You're fighting for the biggest organization ever. You've been fighting for a long time, right? Like 11 years.
Yeah.
Your first professional fight was 2002?
Yes, that's right.
Right around when Brawl in the Hall was happening. That was my first UFC.
It was. I think it was either just before or just after that event.
Okay. And we're going to get to the fight, but in the fight, you could see that Rosie's a seasoned professional, and you'd been in these situations before, and that was obvious to me. But I've watched the sport for a long time, and it was just like, after that first round, she's like, okay, now she knows what she's really gotten herself into, which is someone who's been there and done that. But for you fought all around the world. What was the UFC experience like? Those couple days before the fight, and then the fight itself.
It was all pretty crazy, really. We flew out on the Tuesday, and I got into Winnipeg about 11 o'clock at night. Got to the hotel 11:30, and the first thing that happens, take you into an office, give you a big stack of paper, right, read that and sign it. I could have signed anything at that point. I think I may have confessed to being a terrorist. So yeah, and then sort of from that point on, you've got a schedule of media engagements and be here at this time and all the usual press stuff. At the same time, you making weight and getting your last few training sessions in. So it's a pretty full-on few days.
It's not the funnest time. Is it the worst part of the camp?
I don't know. I mean, you're being asked to sort of present yourself and to be your best at a time when you really don't feel like doing it. I think for any fighter at that point. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I didn't have a big weight cut to make, so it wasn't like I was dehydrated and starving. But those last few days, your mind's on the fight. You're making weight. You've got a lot to think about, and it's not necessarily the time when you want somebody sticking a camera in your face
and asking the same question.
And ask you. How are you feeling about it, and how are you coping with all these UFC nerves? I wish I could tell you.
How many media engagements did you have that week? Like how many separate ones? It's like a rough
I lost
idea.
count. It was
20 plus.
I mean, the week before I flew out, I counted it up. I think it came to about 20. That was the week before I flew out, and then when I was out there, there were quite a few phone interviews, as well as sort of the regular press conference and things like that. So
okay,
it was a lot of the time it's getting asked the same questions. How's the fight camp going? How's your preparation? How do you see this fight going? And for me as well, it's like what are you doing at 135 pounds? You fought all your career at 125, everything. And again, just going into the fight, some of those questions are a bit tricky to answer. It's especially when you're getting asked about how you're going to deal with all the the first time nerves being in the UFC and everything. And it's right at the point when I'm wondering that myself.
So those questions get into your head a little bit.
So you sort of start thinking, how am I going to deal with it? I don't know. I've not been there before.
And was there cage jitters? I read your piece in the Huffington Post, but I was just wondering, when you went in, did you feel any kind of adrenaline dump or anything like that?
I think, to be honest, from the point where I started the warm-up, I think that was the calmest I'd been.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. It was. I was kind of expecting, things to be like a little more tense, But actually, compared to relatively smaller shows when I've been there, it was nothing. It was just really cool.
He was nervous.
Yeah.
I was a little bit nervous.
You were nervous before you flew out.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you then. What was it like that last 6 hours before she went in and getting all that, and how was it? How was she? You said she was calm.
Yeah, Rosie really stepped the game up. You know, the whole week that we were there, it just got better and better every day. We went to the press conferences and stuff like that, and went through the whole rigmarole of the media stuff. She took it all in her stride. It was really, you know, I didn't really have anything to do. I was kind of, you know, before I went, I was thinking, God, man, I'm gonna have to give some kind of, you know, Al Pacino any given Sunday a pep talk. You know, it's really gonna have to, you know, didn't have to do anything. I just kind of held the water, held the bucket, you know, and go.
And what do you chalk that up to? Is that just experience because Rosie's been there and done that, or
that's a decade plus of fighting around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just knowing that process. You know, I know what I need to do now once I start warming up, and if it's you just sort of slot into that rhythm. And you've got that process that you go through, and it's just sort of step by step, and you know where you are. And it was almost like once that happened, it's like, okay, I know where I am now. You know, this is it's a slightly bigger venue. There's more people out there. There's more people watching. There's all the media stuff. But at the end of the day, it's me and somebody else in there, and it's a fight like any other fight, and that's all I have to take care of. In a very real sense, you know, what's going on outside of that octagon, that's none of my business.
Yeah.
You know, I just have to take care of what's going on inside.
Right. Which sounds very obvious, but getting your brain to focus on it is a different thing.
Yeah. I mean, it almost makes it that's kind of almost the easy bit. It's the bits beforehand where you're having to deal with all the media and the pressure, and it's kind of this slightly unfamiliar aspect to it. But once you get in there, it's like, well, this is what I do.
Right.
You know, I think. I mean, it also helps. Some of the shows I fought on, I mean, in particular, Cage Warriors. You know, they run a very professional show, and in a lot of ways, it felt very similar.
Okay.
You know, I think in the way it was run, you know, it's just. I remember getting into the arena the day before when we did the weigh-ins, and just having a look at the arena, you know, looking at the octagon, thinking, this feels just like the Cage Warriors show. You know,
wow.
At that point, and I think that really helped. You know, because it was just knowing. This is really no different.
Those just the few extra people and the big vibe. I just thought it was really good fun. You know, so I think that I don't think I fought in front of more than I think 4,000 was probably the biggest venue I've ever been in.
That's a lot of people.
It was still it was enough to make it there's something like physically tangible about the noise of the crowd. You know, where it's actually kind of vibrates your body. You know, it's which it's just a bit more of a rush, you know, when the crowd's that bit louder. And,
I think your frontal lobe can tell you it's just the cage, but I think your back and your lizard brain is telling you, okay, something's going on here.
I mean, you do definitely feel that energy there. You know, I mean, the Canadians were great. You know, I think it felt like quite a friendly crowd.
Yeah,
you know, even though I was there fighting a Canadian fighter. It didn't really feel hostile at any point.
If you were in Brazil, it would have been different.
This is it. I think if you're gonna be the away fighter anywhere, then Canada's probably the place to do it. You know, so beforehand, somebody was talking to me and asking me what do you think it'll be like getting booed by Canadians? And well, at the end, I mean, aside from anything, I think you just feel the energy. It doesn't really matter whether they're cheering or booing. It kind of all feels the same once you're in there.
It was the most polite booing I've ever heard. I mean, it was sort of.
So they did boo, yeah.
There was a little bit, but it was sort of I think it was sort of a token boo, and they went, oh no, it's just nice. They were really nice to Canadian people. Even like the days running up, you know, everybody was so pleasant.
Yeah, and before and after as well. You know, there were a lot of people coming up to me and just being really nice.
Okay. So you get in there with Alexis. She's got a little bit of a height advantage, a little bit of a size advantage because she fights at this weight naturally, and you don't. What surprised you and what didn't surprise you in that first round? You started throwing hands right away, and
I think that surprised me. I don't know. I mean, I think it was kind of what we were expecting. You know, I mean, I think. She's naturally a little bit bigger than me. You know, she felt strong. That's something that I was expecting. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of the fight. I remember little snatches here and there. Right. I've not watched it back yet.
Okay, interesting.
I keep putting that off.
That's yet to come.
I hate watching my performances back.
Okay.
Because you always look at them and you think, oh, I should have done that.
Even wins you don't like watching?
Yeah, any performance. Because I mean, anything, however well you did, there's always something that you could have done better, or you could have done differently. And you sort of look at it and you go, oh, that wasn't very good.
Johnny Depp does the same thing.
Yeah,
So he doesn't watch his own movies, so you're in good company.
I always do watch them eventually, but it sometimes takes me a little while to actually. I need to get a bit of distance from it before I can sit down and. Okay, let's look at that now.
Okay, so I remember I haven't watched it. I only watched the fight that night, but in that first round, I mean, it was quite obvious that she was attempting a triangle on you for a good 2 or 3 minutes of that round, probably the last two minutes.
Yeah.
And anyone who watches MMA knows that these days, if someone kind of gets that foot folded underneath the knee, it's a pretty high hit ratio. I mean, I would say it's over 80% for getting taps. Not a lot of people get out of it when it's that deep, and you were in that deep. And yet you kept punching her in the face with a triangle on. And even I at one point was like, I don't know if she can last. But she did. So what happened there?
I'm struggling to remember now exactly how worried I was, you know, how close it felt. From memory, I don't think it felt as close maybe as it might have looked from outside. I'm generally pretty hard to triangle. You know, I've had some pretty good people triangle me, and generally it takes them a fair bit to actually finish it.
Okay.
You know, but I think my attitude to that sort of thing is, well, if I'm not unconscious, it's not a problem. Which I get shouted at by my corner team.
Actually, you know, when me, Paul and Danny were on the other side of the cage, so it wasn't easy to see exactly how it was positioned, and we didn't really realize, or I didn't realize how effective the punches were going in there. So when I watched it back on the video, I can see there was like a danger zone for it was like there for about 5 seconds, or maybe a bit more, where she actually locked the foot in, like on the shin and not on the foot. Yeah. But a lot of the time it was on the foot, or the foot was slightly open, and Rosie edged around and positioned it and stacked her a little bit against the cage. Yeah. And so she was just eating flush shots, you know. So it actually, you know, fights look very different when when you're in them, and then when you're watching them from the corner or a refereeing position, and then when you see them on TV from a sort of maybe a more objective camera angle, fights can really look very different, and you can score them very differently as well. You know, like a lot of times, you know, like judges get panned, and you know, I mean, I'm quite a vocal critic of a lot of judging that goes on, but when you watch things on TV and when you watch things on live, they look very different. You know,
okay.
You don't always perceive the same things. You know.
So did the judges agree you won that first round?
I'm not sure how they scored it by round, actually. I'm not sure. But I mean, I think I was doing a reasonably good job of keeping enough space to breathe while I wasn't just letting her triangle me.
Right.
I think there was some stuff going on there that may not have been immediately obvious.
But just after that first round broke, I was just like,
yeah.
That is like the essence of Rosie, because that's like total experience. Because a lot of people would have tapped with the excitement and the lights and all this stuff. But I mean, you'd obviously been there and done that, and you were just like, this is not going to happen.
I'm almost more surprised that people are surprised that I didn't tap.
Okay.
I mean,
we don't know you that well.
To me, I don't quite understand the point of tapping to a triangle. This might just be me, but the worst case, you're going to wake up and, okay, well, that didn't really go to plan. But up until that point, you're still in the fight. You know.
A lot of the times it's psychological. You know, people get caught in a submission, and then think, oh God, no, I'm getting submitted here. I got caught, and they start having, you know, sort of having guilt about getting caught, and the panic, you know, starts making them choke before the air runs out.
I think a lot of people do panic. I think a lot of people tap out of fear as well. It might not be necessarily that close. And also, I think with chokes as well. I mean, I've said a few times, I think the last 10% of a submission, you know, the difference between it being sunk and you being out, you know, or breaking the joint in the case of a joint lock, I think a lot of the time people don't really understand that portion that well, because it's not something that people typically train, and for good reason. You know, I'm not advocating going away and choking your mates unconscious on a regular basis, but I think just because something's sunk doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go out from it. And I mean, in my experience, the times I've been put out have been the ones I wasn't expecting to go out from. You know, it's just been something that's just called a funny angle or something like that. And there's been a few when I thought I probably was going out, and I didn't. So for me, you know, it's always worth taking a shot at it. You know, it's like, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I've heard other fighters say that as well. Like from chokes, there's no point in tapping because.
Well, I suppose the other way to look at it is who would you rather fight? You know, would you rather fight somebody who's going to tap when you get the choke sunk, or would you rather fight somebody who's going to make you put them out? It's you know, people who'll do that are a lot harder to finish. You know, so
after that first round, you go back to your corner. How are you feeling? Are you feeling good about that? You know, you obviously had hit her in the face repeatedly. How are things? Or do you remember? Probably don't remember.
I don't remember.
Okay, it was just on autopilot at that point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think back now. But
I've seen this before.
I've just got flashes of it.
I remember seeing Rich Franklin one time, and they Joe Rogan did the decision, did the interview. He had lost a decision, and then right afterward, Rich Franklin turned to his corners and he's like, "Okay, what happened?" And it was just like the weirdest thing. You know, he had no idea what had happened in the last 3 rounds.
Yeah,
it's common. I think like maybe our first 10 fights, I only had like the vaguest bits of recollection, or you get confused about how the order in which things happen. And even now, I still get like a little bit of time distortion. You know, things that seem to take forever are over in seconds, and then and vice versa. You know,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Paul saying to me, "Okay, you won that round. We just need another 2." I think.
Okay.
So, great, another 2 of them, no problem.
So if we fast forward to 2 more rounds, it's a decision loss. Did you expect that when the judges did that? Did you think it was very close? And how did it make you feel?
I mean, at that point, I honestly wasn't expecting to win that decision. You know, I think I realised at that point that I probably hadn't done enough. I think it was. I mean, a lot of people say. I think the feedback afterwards suggested it was maybe closer than it felt to me at the time. Mm. So I think it'll be interesting watching it back, sort of see what I think, you know, when I actually see it.
Yeah, I doubted myself because like the build up makes a difference. Like we build this girl up and we build her against Rosie, and then you're like, oh yeah, I guess she did probably win. And then like, a couple days later, I was like, maybe that was closer than I thought it was, that fight. And then so I think it was very close.
When I watched it back, I mean, I'm not complaining, you know. And at the time, it's okay, you know, it was a great fight. So you want to win, but you know, there's not only one kind of victory, you know. So I went away feeling victorious afterwards, you know. I felt like partying, you know.
I felt victorious, even though I wasn't part of the team. Yeah, I was just like, that was awesome. What a great introduction. I mean, but I don't know. Can you weigh those? Can you feel good afterwards and be like, yeah, even though the decision wasn't yours?
I mean, in all honesty, it didn't really feel like a loss. It's one that I think it was close enough that I think it could have gone either way without being a robbery, you know. And I felt like I'd given a pretty good account of myself, all things considered.
Definitely. I've never seen anyone get interviewed by Joe Rogan, and she was so tired that she couldn't talk. She couldn't talk. She was just dead tired. Yeah. And just looked like she was just like, man, I didn't see that coming. So, yeah.
That was kind of satisfying, you know. I think getting the opportunity to prove a few people wrong, I think, because, I mean, I'd been seeing a lot of stuff. I kind of try not to look too much in the run-up to a fight, but some of it sort of filters its way through to your consciousness. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff going about how I'm too small for the weight class, you know, I'm going to get beat up pretty easy, you know, all this stuff, you know, and sort of go, well...
What do you mean I try not to look? You're like, I don't even searching there, hashtag Rosi Sexton, you know, come on, yeah. Come on.
Apparently you have a bit of a social media problem. Yeah.
Addiction.
I don't admit to Pete that I've been looking.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
That's dangerous. I mean, as a fighter, that can probably get in your head.
Yeah, I mean, it really can as well. You know, I think it's it definitely. There's times when you kind of don't want to think too much about what everyone else is saying.
Okay. So after the fight, are you rubbing elbows with Dana White and hanging out with all the people? And did you get a lot of love from the UFC?
I mean, I spoke to a few people. You know, I think. I mean, I think it remains to be seen how things are going to pan out from this point. You know, nothing official has been said. But,
okay.
We'll see. We'll
Okay.
see. You know, I'm reasonably hopeful that they're going to have me back.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer. You could argue that you're one of the most famous British fighters in the UFC. I mean, you know, and that talks. I mean, the UFC is all about.
I mean, I think they like the media coverage I've been getting. You know, I think that definitely goes in my favour.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about women in MMA and the fact that you're getting BBC coverage. You know, Ronda Rousey's getting ESPN coverage, where the sport could never get that coverage before, no matter what kind of super athlete you have, whether it's John Jones or Anderson Silva. And now all of a sudden these new media outlets are coming in, and women are coming in and getting main events and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's been no history in the last even like 500 years of everyone watching women compete in such a high level of fighting. Do you think we're not ready for it? Do you think people are not used to it?
I mean, I think the thing with women's fights, particularly with the way the UFC have done it, I think it gets a certain amount of attention from the mainstream media because it's something that people don't expect to see. I think one of the problems that maybe mixed martial arts has had as a sport is that people from outside look at it and they think they know what it's about. You know, guys fighting, it's got all the stereotypes attached to it, and people make a lot of assumptions based on that. Now, I think when you put women in there, it goes against some of those stereotypes and maybe doesn't fit as neatly with people's assumptions about what fighting is about. And it makes people look twice. And I think that's the thing maybe that gets the media attention.
So why so much more with women's MMA than you know, women's boxing or women's Thai boxing?
I think particularly at the moment, you know, you've got the whole phenomenon of the UFC and with Ronda Rousey as well. I mean, I think she's got a lot to do with the current interest in women's MMA. I think the fact that she's come across from being a highly successful Olympic athlete, and also she's got a personality which is very media friendly. You know, I think a lot of people are very interested in what she's got to say. She's got a character there. You know, I think, love her or hate her, you know, she's someone that people are going to be interested in. So I think that definitely gets a lot of attention as well, and maybe opens some people's eyes to women's MMA who hadn't really considered it before. Possibly, you know, even within the UFC itself, I think, and that's kind of opened some doors for the other female fighters. And I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the women's division is that there are so many people there with so many different stories, you know, so many different backgrounds, and I think it's a lot harder to stereotype female fighters than it is to stereotype male fighters, at least from, you know, the perspective of an outsider coming into the sport. You know, I think MMA fans, you know that the fighters are all different and everyone's got their favourite and like that. But I think from outside, the danger is that people just assume, you know, it's two thugs beating each other up in a cage. I mean, that's the perception issue that the MMA has struggled with really from day one.
Yeah, they're all bald guys with tattoos.
Yeah, with tattoos.
Cauliflower ears.
Tattoos on their hands and face. And cauliflower ears. No, it is a strange thing. It's like when you see guys, you know, in the cage, then people kind of like, oh yeah, that's what these weird guys do. But when they see a woman, they're like, well, maybe we should find out what's going on.
I mean, I don't think it's no more true for the guys. You know, I think there's a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds who come to the sport, but I think it's much easier to make those assumptions when it's two men.
Right.
When you throw women in there, it's almost like it doesn't quite fit with the way people's brains work, people's stereotypes, and so it makes people look twice. And then as soon as people start looking into the sport, they maybe see a little bit deeper than they saw before, and they start to look at it a bit differently.
I love watching women's fights. I mean, I've talked about this before with you. Is it like, because when they're in there, the women really just lay it all out on the line. It's just like they don't have to be there. It's not considered a byproduct of their manhood. Like, you really had to go out of your way to fight MMA. You know, you really had to, you know, tell everyone to fuck off and you're going to do this with your life, and then you have to get beat up and probably not paid very well, and you still do it, and you still do it, and you still do it. And so when I see two women fight on any card, usually it's a fantastic fight and they lay it all on the line. Where sometimes I see guys doing it and maybe they don't know why they're doing it. I don't know, maybe I'm being really unfair to a lot of male fighters, but sometimes I see two guys in there that don't seem to want it as bad as the women.
I think that's a good point, actually. I mean, I think people have often said, you know, the women always come to fight. And I think it does have a lot to do with the fact that at this point in time, anyway, the women who are there, they're not there because they didn't get into the sport with the expectation of making a lot of money or, you know, becoming famous.
Right, or even being cool,
exactly, yeah,
or being accepted by their peers, the opposite.
I think this is it. I think the people who are there at this point in time, you know, they're because they really love the sport. You know, it'd be interesting to see if that changes, you know, over the next few years. You know, now MMA, women's MMA is trendy. You know, it'll be interesting to see sort of the next generation coming through. You know, I think we're going to see a lot of talent, but it'll be interesting to see whether people are getting into it for those same reasons, you know, or whether that changes a little bit.
Pete, what do you think about?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the same thing when I was a guest. You know, when we're talking about what's your motivation and stuff like that. And I had to concede, I don't know why girls do it. I don't know. You know, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't interested in women's MMA at all. You know, I just ended up meeting Rosie, and that was basically how come I ended up following women's MMA at all. But if it wasn't for Rosie, I would never watch the girls fight till this day, probably.
Wow. I'm glad you laid it on the line like that. This is what makes a ball game, as they say in the States. So why do you fight?
I wish I could tell you. I think my reasons have changed over the years. You know, I think the reasons I do it now aren't the same as the reasons I started out. You know, I mean, going back to when I started out in martial arts, you know, I was a naive 14-year-old kid. You know, I think it was initially about self-defense. You know, I wanted to know that. I'm going to say self-defense, but I think when people talk about self-defense in a martial arts context, what they really mean is they want to know that they can fight. You know, not necessarily because they want to fight, but in order to know that they can. I think it's. So
it's not self-defense; it's really just offense, just knowing they could beat someone up.
Or in a physical confrontation, you can come out on top. Okay. I suppose, you know, not necessarily that you want to initiate it, but
just say it. Yeah. Just say you want to beat people up. It's all right, you know.
Yeah.
Come clean. Don't let her. Yeah. Don't let her lie to me.
No, I'm trying to put my finger on exactly what it was about it that appealed to me, you know, at that stage. But you know, I started doing that, and I enjoyed doing it. You know, I wasn't very good at it. For a long time, I wasn't very good at it.
Which is a recipe for addiction, isn't it? If you're not good at it.
And I mean, eventually, I started out in Taekwondo. Eventually, I got to the stage where I'm thinking, okay, well, there's probably a bit more to fighting than this. So I started looking around at a few other martial arts, and this was long before I'd heard of mixed martial arts or had anything to do with the UFC. You know, and I mean, I think it was. I'm just trying to think in terms of timeline. I mean, this must have been sort of right back in the very early days of the UFC, anyway. And you know, after doing a few other martial arts, I was at university. I kind of got to the stage where, you know, I was maybe thinking about teaching martial arts, and people were asking me about doing self-defense and things. I just didn't feel like I knew enough. You know, I realised at that point that I'd spent a long time doing this, but I'd never actually been in a fight. And okay, I knew a lot of moves, but I had no idea whether any of this actually worked. And that kind of bothered me. So that was roughly the time when I first saw a documentary about mixed martial arts. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, that's something I want to do.
Do you remember the documentary?
I think it was Natural Born Fighters or something like that. It was Ian Freeman and Lee Remedios.
Okay.
I remember.
Yeah, I might have seen that.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
Lee Remedios he was back in the day,
yeah,
wasn't he?
Yeah.
Some slick submissions too.
It's quite funny because they're both, you know, they're both friends of mine now. But yeah, so that's the documentary I saw, and that's when I started thinking, okay, well, this is something I need to do. And at that time, it was about proving to myself that I could do it. You know, the idea was I was going to go out, have a couple of fights, and then get on with the rest of my life, whatever that was. And I found myself a gym to train at. A couple of years later, had a couple of fights, and somewhere along the line, I kind of got hooked on it, and I started thinking, I wonder how good I could get at this. And I suppose that's what kept me in it.
You must have enjoyed those fights, because you wouldn't go back otherwise.
I'm not sure whether or not I enjoyed the fights. I think I enjoyed the process.
And the test.
Yeah, and that feeling of, I suppose, what I got out of training for it and what I got out of doing it. It's a good question whether I actually enjoy the fights themselves. I don't know.
Okay.
I've discussed this with Pete, actually.
Yeah.
I think we feel differently about this.
Yeah. Me, I like to fight. Yeah, if I could fight without training, I really would. If I didn't really care if I won that much, that I could just get away with not preparing for it. I prepared diligently, because I'm a professional, and I like sparring and stuff like that because it's almost like a fight.
Right.
But then, yeah, the training's a drag, and it eats up too much time, and it dominates your life, and you end up missing everything, to the point where people start getting used to you saying, no, I can't come, no, I can't have a drink, no, I can't. Yeah,
and they stop inviting you.
You just stop getting invited. Yeah, you do. And then people only want to know you when they need you to defend them. It's
in court or personally.
Yeah. Self-defense.
So let me ask you a question, Pete. I've known you for like a year, I think. I don't know, but you seem like not the kind of guy that you don't seem to suffer fools. You seem to probably not spend your time with a lot of people, but yet you do spend your time with Rosi, and obviously you cornered her for this fight, and you speak very highly of her. And I was just wondering why, and why would you do that? And when did you meet her? And was it something right away where you were like, I don't know, it makes time for me to help train this person, or I don't know.
It might have been you actually that I was talking to about. Who's the American psychologist that said you are the sum total of the 7 people you spend?
I think it's you're the average of the 5 people you spend time with.
Okay, yeah. So I blundered the quote, but the idea is interesting. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that it's how true it is, but there's certainly something to it, And the people that you surround yourself with, they affect the way that you see the world, and and the way that you comport yourself, So yeah, so when you find something in other people that you that not that you want to imitate, but that like a standard you want to live up to, So they're the people that you should surround yourself with, Which is the good thing about MMA and jiu-jitsu and and Thai boxing. Those people are abundant. There's always some first class human beings kicking around in those circles.
True. So what was it with Rosi? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to talk about your feelings today.
Oh, damn it! I'm a trick. I mean, we were talking about the fight before. Just wouldn't tap. And that's that's the determination that I put a lot of value on, I'm not being mean, but you're not the best, you're not the best athlete, and I'm not the best athlete, a lot of the best fighters I know are not the best athletes. They're not the most well coordinated. It doesn't come that easy to a lot of the best fighters. But you put them in the ring and you put them under duress, and then they shine. That's the quality of human beings is really is outed under that kind of pressure. And gyms all over the world are full of guys who would kick my ass. And guys and girls who probably kick your ass too in the gym. But you put them in the ring with an audience watching, and they're nothing. They crumble. They fall to pieces. And then like we're saying, like every step of the way, you raised your game. And you stepped up to the, you know, the more pressure that was mounted, the tougher and tougher you got. You know, all the people that I, you know, the people that I really hold dear, that I've met through martial arts. You know, like Craig Jones from my Thai training partner and coach up in Newcastle, and Pete Teox, the guy, he was the cage rage champion, stuff like that. All those guys, when you put them in hard fights, they just thrive on it. You know, really just, you know, they expose the real deep quality. So yeah, so that anyway, that's what
okay. That's pretty good. That was a good answer.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, what I remember is I remember training with Pete.
When was this?
Let me think. It must have been 2009, 2010, something like that.
Yeah.
That'd be the first time you guys started training together?
I mean, I think we've kind of known each other longer than that. But
I used to go and see Rosie because she was for osteopathy treatments.
Okay.
That was how come I got to know you through Howell from BJJ Hacks that I mention every time that I come on.
Oh yeah, you do sometimes.
I go, yeah. Yeah, so yeah.
And then you were training in 09 together.
I think I was between training camps at the time, and I went up to do some training with Pete in Newcastle, and he kicked my ass all over the place, and he goes, "Yeah, you're all right, but you're not as good as you could be."
Nice. So,
okay.
was this
all
MMA?
right.
Were you guys rolling or just MMA training, or?
We did a bit of
MMA
sparring,
training,
yeah.
did everything.
And yeah, okay. Go on then, show me what you got. And I think that's
yeah,
kind of
because I didn't know if she was any good or not because I'd never watched any of her fights.
Okay.
Yeah, that was so. Yeah.
So you started training her after that? Regularly?
We trained together
Yeah.
sort of on and off. I think, you know, we've worked together a lot over the years. I think sort of developed from that, really.
Okay, deal. So now we see Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate. They're on The Ultimate Fighter. They're in the house. There's all this crazy stuff going on. And I was just wondering if so say Miesha gets in a train wreck, hopefully not, and you get the phone call and it's like, you're going to fight Ronda. What do you say?
Obviously, you say yes. You know, there's no real question there.
True.
You know.
All right. So
I mean, I very much doubt that's going to happen, but it's one of those things. You know, with a chance like that, you've got to take it.
Okay. And could you beat Ronda Rousey?
I'd give it a damn good go.
I believe you. I texted Pete. I was like, Rosie's tough as nails. That was my text the next day. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, no. I feel like I was there in a way because I felt a lot of pride, and you learn a lot about someone in a hard role, and you see who taps and who doesn't tap, and it's a huge indication of character.
That's kind of the beauty of you know, the fights as well. You know, where you kind of the people around you get raised up by it too. You know, like you share in the defeats, but you share in the victories too. You know, and you know you can change just what am I trying to say? You know, like people's experience of the whole lives gets raised by by your victories or by your efforts. You know, it's
I think I understand. I want to find out more about just you and your normal day life, but I just want to ask one more question about women's MMA while we're on this topic, and I'm just going to go a little bit deeper. I mean, we've seen Ronda Rousey, the phenomenon, the personality that she is, and when we also see the way that she does media before a fight, and she's got the hair done and the heels on, and she knows exactly how to work the media in that way. And sometimes I see that and I'm like, that's so smart. And then sometimes I see that and I'm like, what does that say of us as a species, that we need her to be pretty? And then we respond to her being pretty, even though we know it's a fight, and even though I know MMA very well. And the most startling contrast to me is weigh-in day, where you have two female fighters facing off, and behind them are the ring girls, and you have two females in a completely different personas. You know, one is there to look glamorous and one is there to fight, but then she also looks glamorous in the meantime. So I'm going to ask your thoughts on this. And what do you think about what Ronda does, and what does that say about us as humans when we want our women fighters to be pretty, but then we want them to punch each other in the face? So what's your call? What's your read on that?
I think I'm not sure what it says about us as a species, but I mean, Ronda's smart. You know, she knows how to play the game, and she plays the game, and it's worked out very well for her. You know, I think sometimes I think I should be better at playing the game,
but you couldn't do it with a straight face.
I don't know. It's just maybe I put a little too much value on being me. You know, I think I'm. You know, I'll go so far. I think we all play the game to some degree. You know, I don't think it's possible to say, you know, I'm not going to play at all. I think if you're in there, that's what you do. But I think we have a limit as to how far we're going to go, and that's different for everyone. You know, and I think I find it very difficult to present myself as something other than what I am. You know, I am who I am, flaws and all. And you know, I'll put on a front up to a point, but there comes a point where you say, well, you know, this is me, take it or leave it. I think in some ways, you know, sometimes I sort of think, oh, I'd do better if I was more like, you know, Miesha Tate or Ronda Rousey, you know. But then I think I may not have as many fans on Twitter as they do. You know, I may not have as many people following my career, but the people who are there generally appreciate me for what I am and not for something that I'm pretending to be. And personally, I like that. You know, I think it probably holds me back to a degree. You know, I think I'd probably do better if I was, you know, more like that. But so it works for me. Okay. I'm pretty happy with where I am. You know, where it's got me.
Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the ring girls is a funny thing. I always found that weird. You know, when I see girls fights, and then you got these like two very, very different feminine ideals being presented at the same time. I think the ring girls look kind of stupid standing there.
They do.
They do. Like, yeah. But I don't know what it says about the species. Yes. Yeah. I don't know what, you know. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Do you like ring girls? Do you hate ring girls, or do you not care?
I largely don't care. You know, I think it kind of depends how they're presented. You know, I think you can take these things too far. I think, you know, I've seen MMA shows where it's bordered on adult entertainment. And I think that's probably, you know,
well put.
Nobody really appreciates that. Yeah, like I say, I've heard a lot of guys actually say that, you know, if I want to see that sort of thing, there's other places I can go to see it. I don't want to see it at a fight show. But I think, you know, if you're about a couple of pretty girls walking around holding round cars, I don't really have an opinion on that. You know, I think it's kind of traditional in the fight game. It's something that's been there. I think it would probably be more trouble to get rid of than it is to, you know, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have any very strong feelings about it.
Okay, no, I wanted to know. The UFC does it really intelligently, I think.
Yeah,
that they,
yeah. I mean, I think it's done with good taste. You know?
Yeah, and I think Dana made that decision first on. You know, they don't wear heeled shoes. It's relatively tasteful, and it's like, and that's very smart. I think what they've done, and I kind of like the way that they do it. And like you said, it probably, I don't know. It's something that probably will be around for a while, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not one of the things that I feel strongly enough to make an issue of. I think it's, it is what it is.
Okay, fair enough. I was wondering, you've got this PhD in theoretical computer science. I was wondering, have you ever wanted to work in that field or not?
I kind of got to the end of my PhD, and I think my thought process was, I don't want to spend the next 40 years of my life sat behind a desk. I mean, I enjoyed maths. I enjoyed doing the degree, and to some extent, I enjoyed the PhD. I mean, it got to be a bit of a drag towards the end, as PhDs tend to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I kind of got to the stage where I thought, what else is out there? You know, I've spent the last 7 years of my life doing this. You know, maybe it's time to do something else for a bit. And that was the time when I was starting to get into MMA. In fact, I think I'd had a couple of fights already, and things were going along that line. So I thought, well, I'll stick with this for a bit and see where it takes me. And it was sort of in that period that I developed an interest in sports injuries, mostly because if you hang around MMA gyms long enough, you run into a lot of injured people. And I thought, I'd like to learn more about that. And again, that led me down the osteopathy route. And I suppose here we are. So that's kind of how that happened.
Okay, and that's your full-time job?
At the moment, I divide my time between being a professional fighter and doing osteopathy.
The beauty of it being that you can create your own clients by
beating them up.
Yeah.
Something wrong with your neck here.
Yeah. Odd that you specialise in neck attacks, isn't it?
I don't actually do that because that would be unethical. But I think it's enough to hang around MMA gyms. I think people come to you. You don't need to create more injuries.
Yeah, that's probably true. There's something I definitely want to ask you about because, you know, people in the UFC probably don't know, but a year ago, you know, you had a fight scheduled with Sheila Gaff, right? And you were a very big proponent of the VADA testing and the drug testing, and that fight never happened, and people have different theories on that. And I was just wondering if you could talk about your whole mentality of having VADA involved and how you think that affects the sport right now as far as drug testing and everything.
I think a lot of sports have issues with drugs in sport. You know, I think the problem is when there's a big incentive to be the best in the world, or to be one of the best in the world, then people are going to do what it takes, you know, within what they think they can get away with. And I think it puts people in a very difficult position, I think, when the possibility of taking drugs is there. You know, whether that's because there's no drug testing or because the drug testing is, for whatever reason, not at a level to discourage that kind of use. So it gives people a big dilemma. You know, it's like if you feel like all your competitors are using drugs, then what do? You know, do you tell yourself, I'd only be leveling the playing field, you know, and do it as well, or do you not do it and then maybe not get as far in that sport as you would otherwise? So I think it's particularly an issue in combat sports where one person's actually trying to do damage to another person. You know, it's a bit different in, you know, in athletics or swimming or cycling, where, you know, you're competing to be the fastest. I mean, I think it's still a big issue when you've got careers and money on the line. You know, I don't think it's not negligible by any means. But I think in mixed martial arts, it does raise an extra issue there.
Are you happy with what the UFC does right now, as far as their drug testing?
I mean, as I understand it, most of the drug testing for the UFC is run by the athletic commissions in the US. And my personal feeling is that they could be doing more.
Right.
You know, that's my personal feeling. You know, I don't want to get into the politics of it or anything like that, but I think the problem is at the moment it's largely done with in-competition testing. You know, they'll test you immediately after the event, and
they're doing some out of competition testing. That's how they got
some of the states are moving in that direction, which I think is a good thing. You know,
but it's not consistent from state to state.
This is it. I mean, you've got wildly different standards from one state to another. I mean, I think there was a female fighter who tested positive. This wasn't the UFC. This was a local promotion, I think. Who tested positive. I think it was in Ohio. It's the second time she's tested positive, and they gave her a 6-month ban and they fined her $500, I believe. And you look at that and you think, well, why bother testing at all if that's what you're going to do?
You're saying it's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not going to discourage anyone from using drugs.
Usually they're banning the male fighters like 1 year, like the Chael Sonnens and stuff, usually out for a year.
I mean, I think again, I mean, the problem is there's no consistency. You know, there's from one state to another, you know, from one situation to another. So I think that makes it very difficult, because at the moment I don't feel like there's a real disincentive for fighters to use drugs. I think, you know, a rational person looking at the situation could quite easily come to the conclusion that it's worth their while taking that risk.
Right. Do you ever think that there will be a sport or an Olympics or anything where drugs will be allowed, where people will be able to make themselves the best athletes they can be?
It's called Pride, wasn't it?
Well, there's Pride. There's strongman. You know, there's you know, there's sports where this sort of thing goes on, or it's, if not openly acknowledged, then at least, you know, tacitly condoned.
I mean, cycling was the big, you know, obvious one. People talked about it for years, and yet I believed Lance Armstrong when he said he was not taking it, and I still believed him until a few years ago.
Yeah.
But then you have to sort of feel sorry, you know, for from sort of being the sacrificial lamb, you know, where, you know, whenever, you know, and everybody turns around, oh, that's terrible. You know, but like, it really was in fact leveling the playing field. You know, I think.
And again, I mean, there is a lot of that goes on, you know, in MMA as well. I think, you know, there's every so often somebody tests positive, and everyone, you know, jumps on their case and, oh, isn't this terrible? And they're the devil. And I think, and you got to think, well, there's an awful lot of people who are doing just the same thing but not getting caught.
Yeah. What is it then that is the defining characteristic of a substance that's legal and not legal? I mean, because if some, you know, if one of my athletes comes in and says, oh, I'm not taking my glutamine, I'm not taking my fish oils, I'm not taking my zinc, I say, you're crazy. What are you doing? You know, that just seems like good common sense. But then, what is there like a chemical definition?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you, with most sports, you look at the World Anti-Doping Association. They have a banned list. If it's on the banned list, then you can't take it. You know,
how does it get on there? Is the question?
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting question. I mean,
and that includes marijuana metabolites right now.
I mean, I think as I understand it, and again I may be wrong here, I believe the criteria are, one, it's got a potential for abuse, and it's got the potential to be harmful or dangerous if abused. I think that's what they're looking at. You know, so I mean, like you say, there's a lot of things that people take. I mean, caffeine used to be a restricted substance on the WADA banned list until I think it was about 2004 when they took it off, because I think there was a thought that it may be dangerous if used in performance-enhancing quantities. But then I'm not sure exactly why. I think maybe some further studies were done or something like that, and people decided that actually we're not that worried about this. Go ahead, take what you like, with regard to caffeine. So, I mean, there is that ongoing debate as to what should or shouldn't be on the banned list. But I think ultimately, once you have a list of substances, that's your definition. You know.
Yeah, but it seems very arbitrary, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, and to some degree, I think there is an element of arbitrariness. You know, I think at some point somebody has to decide, is that going to be on or off? But I mean, it's codified in the rules of the sport. I mean, it's no more arbitrary than saying you can't kick people in the head on the ground, for example. Sure. You know, I mean, that's an arbitrary rule, but it's in the rules. Or you can't grab the cage, or 12 to 6 elbows, or any of these other things which are pretty arbitrary when it comes down to it. And there may be a rationale for having them in there at some point, and you could argue about whether they should be or shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, I think you go by the rules as they're written, not as you think they should be. You know, you don't kick people in the head on the ground and then argue, oh, well, it's not really any different from kicking them in the head on the feet. You know, it's like, it's illegal, so you don't do it. And I think that's how you have to look at it with banned substances.
It's just going to be interesting over the next 5-10 years, where you start getting all this crazy technology coming in, whether it's stem cell research or gene therapy, or, you know, people say there's blood doping going on in the UFC, and that would be very hard to test for. And then also about the growth hormone is hard without a blood test. There's things like modafinil, which is like a narcolepsy drug that Tim Ferriss is saying that Usain Bolt takes just to be faster for the 100-yard dash. So
I think it is a very difficult problem, and I'm not sure there's any very easy answers. You know, I mean, you can certainly make it a lot harder for people to abuse steroids or other performance-enhancing drugs. You know, I think if you do proper random out-of-competition testing, the sort of testing where somebody shows up on your doorstep unannounced,
Right.
This is the sort of
Like the
testing
cycling
that VADA do as
Okay.
well. You know, you give them your address, you let them know where you're going to be, and somebody will show up without telling you in advance and will take a urine and blood sample there.
That sounds like a lot of
you know,
fun.
that's
I think I mean personally, it's not an issue for me, but yeah, I find that intrusive. I don't think I would appreciate living my life like that, you know. And I mean, I get, you know, I get maybe perhaps the necessity of it, but I don't think that would be worth it for me to have, you know, feel like I was being policed.
I mean, I can see where people are coming from on that. I mean, for me, you know, the benefits of knowing that everyone else is doing that as well outweighs the cost of a bit of personal inconvenience.
Right.
Yeah, so that's my take on it. You know, I'd rather have it knowing that all my opponents are being tested too. I mean, I suppose that's the price you pay. You know, or I mean, you could go the other way and say we don't care, everything's legal, take what you like. I think personally, I'm not a fan of that approach, but I think at least that would be consistent. That would be honest. You know, I think the problem is when you have a situation where on paper things are illegal, but everyone knows that stuff goes on. I think that's the worst of both possible worlds. You know, I think that makes it very difficult.
Kind of like what the Tour de France was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who suffer in that situation are the fighters, because they're put in that position of having to say, well, do I or don't I?
Yeah.
And you know, if a fighter in that situation makes a decision, well, I'm going to take drugs, and then they get caught, nobody's going to back them up on it. You know, nobody's going to say, oh, well, everyone else was doing it. You know, they're on their own, and they pay the cost for it. So, you know, like I said, I think I would like to see things go one way or the other. You know, I mean, ideally, I would like to see a better standard of testing. And I mean, I think a combination of making it more likely that they're going to catch people, and also tougher penalties when people do get caught. You know, I think that would discourage a lot of people from
doing it.
Yeah.
You got anything to add to that?
I watched the documentary when I was in Russia. The only channel that was in English was the BBC. So they had this BBC documentary. It was really good. It was about the evolution of sprinting, you know, and they showed like how technique changed and stuff like that, and times kept going up because they changed the surface, and you know, times skyrocketed up, and then guys started figuring out how to lean on time to, you know, get a couple of extra seconds. You know, it really made big differences. And then there was another point in time, I don't know exactly when it was, but within sort of more recent history, where all of a sudden all the times skyrocketed again, and they were all guys from Jamaica, all from the same coach, all from the same team, you know, and they had all these like, I could forget who it was, you know, but serious athletes sitting there going, yeah, well, you know, Jamaicans are very relaxed, so I think they just chill out at big events, and you know. Oh, you know, come on, Jamaicans are relaxed, so they're shaving, you know, previously unheard of milliseconds off the times. No, it's absurd, you know. Like personally, I'm for transparency. You know, I think it would make it a lot easier for everybody. But that's just me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll leave it at that. You know, before we wrap up, I want to hear about your social media addiction, and I want to know how you deal with haters, and how have people responded to you since you've come back and since you put your life on the line with the UFC, or put your life on exposure. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, people have been very positive. Actually, you know, I've had a lot of support. So, you know, I'm. It's one of those things. I think if you can't please all of the people all of the time, and there's always going to be people out there who'll pick holes in anything. And I think if you spend too much time focusing on that and thinking about that, I think the danger is it's very easy to pick up on the few negative comments. You know, even though the overwhelming majority might be positive, you know, to pick out on the few negative and sort of dwell on that. You know, especially it's the sort of thing that I tend to do. You know, I tend to focus on.
A lot of people do that.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, it's. Yeah, I think it's pretty common. But
what's your favorite social media platform?
I'm on Twitter a lot. And
yeah.
Facebook as well. I need to cut down.
Yeah.
Pete's always ripping into me for this.
Oh, yeah. Rosie's one of those dreadful people that starts looking at her phone whilst in company.
Oh, that's not good.
I go, no, it's totally unacceptable.
Anyway, I'm glad we're on airplane mode now.
Yeah.
It's tricky. I mean, we get hate here at London Real, and it's some people find that unfathomable, because we're just doing these free shows every week. But it's now lately when someone actually writes something, I'm just thinking, you went out of your day to take some time and send me this, and I was just like, wow, I feel really bad for this person, I just end up not reading a lot of comments.
I think the hardest thing is that my instinct is to argue with them. Look,
Okay.
You don't know what you're talking about. I think I'm really trying hard just to realise, look, just let it go.
Also on
It's just
Twitter,
one of those things.
when you get into argument
Yeah.
with Twitter, then you raise their relevancy to the world.
Yeah,
Which is,
yeah.
And it's just
Yeah.
like Twitter wars. I mean, Dana engages them all the time.
Yeah.
Dana White, and it could be some dude with 7 followers, and he'll be like, Dana, pay-per-view card's too expensive, and he'll be like, what are you talking about? But there's nothing uglier than a bad Twitter war.
Yeah.
With some 12-year-old kid in Birmingham.
That's really the problem, isn't it? The anonymity of it. I mean, it's the beauty of things like Twitter, and it's equally the downfall of them. That everybody shouldn't have equality. If you put those same people in a room, and you're not necessarily gonna pay any attention to their opinion at all. And people that would probably be ridiculed in person, and probably wouldn't even dare open their mouths. They feel like they can't insult fighters, and that's why I don't look at any of these things, because I just get furiously angry. So,
Okay. I think Ice-T said what he's like, if you ever said any of these things out loud that you wrote down on Twitter, most likely you would get beat up in real life. If you ever actually said to someone, hey, you, so it's unfathomable that people seem to be, it's okay to type it out.
It's curious to me, because I don't know, I'd sort of perceived anything that I'd ever written on a forum or anything like that is like something published. Whereas people I think the trend is to feel like what you write online is like it's not real life. It's another world, and it's less. You don't have to stand by it in the same way as something that you said in person. Whereas I think that there's all sorts of things that you say in conversation. Where now, for example, we're being recorded, and I'm a little bit more careful about what I would say now, because I know that there's a record of it. It's in the same sense it's published as if I'd written it publicly. That means a lot more. So all sorts of things that you can say in context in a conversation that you go, oh well, I didn't really mean it, and you can assume fairly with people that they'll pick up on whether you really mean something, or whether you're just being flippant, or whether you're being ironic. If you write something, there's no inflection, and there's no guarantee that the people who are reading it know who you are, and there's a permanent record of it forever. So that's why I don't look on forums anymore. Either.
You're turning into a grumpy old man.
I really am. I know, it's terrible.
Kids these days, they don't turning into. They don't respect it.
Yeah.
All right, Rosie, I gotta finish on asking you a very London Real question, and this is this: if you could pick up the phone and call the 20-year-old Rosie and give her a bit of advice, and it can't be keep doing what you're doing, what would you tell her? It's okay. Many people have taken pause
That's
to
a good
this.
question. You won't believe what the next 15 years is going to look like.
Advice.
Advice.
Is there anything you would tell her to do differently?
It's a good question. This is along the lines of those questions where what if you could change something, what would you change? And the difficulty with that is you don't know if I'd done X or Y differently, where I'd be at this point. I don't know whether things would have worked out better or would have worked out worse. Or it's very hard to say, because I think at this point I'm the sum total of the choices I've made up till now, and really overall I'm pretty happy with where I am at the moment. I think there's maybe something, looking back, there's some things that I might think, oh, I could have done that differently, or I could have handled that better, or if I'd turned left instead of right at that point, where it would be interesting to see where things have ended up. But I can't really say that I regret getting to this point, and so it's hard to say what I should have done differently along that way.
Okay, fair enough. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Surround yourself with good people.
And who told you that?
I can't remember who first said that.
Okay.
But,
Well, it seems like you guys do that a lot.
I think, I think that makes probably a bigger difference.
Okay. And then the last one is, what do you say to that 20-year-old woman out there that's listening to us right now that wants to, be like Rosi Sexton one day, wants to be a professional mixed martial artist? What advice do you tell them of what they should do or not do?
I'd say make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. It's got to be what you want to do, not because you think it's going to make you famous or get you lots of money or make people love you or anything like that. I think it's almost a case of you should only be a professional fighter if you can't imagine yourself not being. If you can't imagine not doing it. It's especially now women's MMA has become trendy, and I think there's people getting in. You see people sometimes getting into it because they might be expecting to get to the top and make a lot of money and things like that. And there's a lot easier ways to make a living. There's much easier ways to make money. It's the only reason to do it really is if you love the sport, and if you couldn't imagine not doing it.
It seems like if you go in for those other wrong reasons, then you'll be tapping from that triangle. That's the way it seems to me. But if you're there because you really want to be there and you're doing what you do. Yeah,
like I said, I think there's much easier ways to make money.
That I believe. That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Great. It's been great to chat to you.
It's good. And Pete, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
You know her so well, and it's nice to see you guys, just your reflections on her. If people want to harass you on social media, how do they get a hold of you?
Twitter's probably the best way. Rosi Sexton, ROSISEXTON.
Okay.
Shoot me a message on there.
Okay, that's better. Facebook too, or?
Facebook, Facebook's okay. If you look me up on Facebook, I'm on there fairly regularly. I don't always get to my friend requests on Facebook because I get a fair few randoms. But if you shoot me a message or say hi, then I'll always try and get back to people.
Leave her alone.
Let her train.
Back to the gym.
Let her train.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I hope we see you in the UFC again soon. You made me proud to be British.
Thank you.
That's always my joke because but I do have a British passport. But yeah, no, I hope we see you back there again.
She's French anyway.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not French.
Born in France.
I'm not French.
Born in France. I'm sure you use that in the gym sometimes.
It was news to me. I don't know.
Fantastic. If you are listening to us, please subscribe on iTunes. If you want to see all of our faces, we're on our YouTube channel, London Real, and we're on Twitter. I'm a big fan of Twitter. I've got all my money on Twitter now. I'm coming off of Facebook, but I'm finding it's a great way to kind of interact with new people and that kind of thing. So follow us there, and awesome. Thanks guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Great.
All right. Until then, it's about the journey. Take care of yourselves.
Welcome to London.
He didn't trust the president. He said, fuck Obama or something like that. And I was like, really? You gonna bring him on trial? I said, yo, why don't you put me on trial? Let's have a conversation on record and let me question the people who are in government who are accusing me of something. Because I would love to have that conversation, but I don't really think you're really built for that. I think you like going after Cage.